All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Home and Energy Chats webinar series and our first episode of the year on tiny homes and ADUs. My name is Heather Chandler, and I'm the owner and publisher of Green and Healthy Maine Homes. We have an all-star lineup tonight, and I imagine that you are just as excited as I am to learn more about these flexible housing options and how they're Maine. So I would like to start by sharing a special thank you to our sponsors, including our season sponsor, Senecal Construction Services, now offering net zero ready design build packages in Pownell, conveniently located minutes from Portland, Freeport, and Brunswick. And a word from our sponsor, Royal River Heat Pumps.
Hi, I'm Scott Libby, owner of Royal River Heat Pumps. A long time ago, the Royal River, like most rivers, was an important part of life, powering mills and allowing a community to grow and flourish. Nowadays, we see what a river can help to create. We believe that ordinary people can come together to make a big difference too. This year, Royal River Heat Pumps will invest our advertising dollars into a new campaign we've launched called Ripple to River. Each month, we'll choose a different nonprofit organization whose focus is kids battling childhood illnesses. We'll tell you about their particular mission and let you know how you can help support them. We're also launching an online resource at rippletoriver.com, providing information and a link for donations. Little things can turn into big change. I'm Scott Libby from Royal River Heat Pumps in Freeport, and I hope you'll join us in making change happen for kids and families that are facing challenges that nobody ever wants to face. Visit rippletoriver.com to learn more and donate, and thank you.
Thank you to all of our Home and Energy Chat sponsors. A quick overview of the evening. We will begin the webinar with a presentation by each of our panelists and then open it up to a discussion with questions following the presentations. We did receive some questions through the registration process. And if you have others now or throughout the presentations, please feel free to submit them using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will try our best to get to them all. A reminder that this webinar will be recorded and uploaded to our website, greenmainehomes.com. If you are not familiar with us, Green and Healthy Maine Homes is a multimedia brand dedicated to inspiring healthy, sustainable, energy smart, and future-ready Maine homes through a quarterly print magazine, an online business directory, monthly newsletters, and an active social media presence. We share expert advice to inspire healthy, comfortable, affordable, efficient, and sustainable Maine homes. So please at greenmainehomes.com to learn more. And now it is my honor to introduce our panelists for the evening. Corinne Watson is the principal and co-founder of Tiny Homes of Maine. She's been drawing floor plans and sketching home designs on scraps of paper for as long as she can remember. She landed her first job out of college at Fairchild Semiconductor and then Smith & Wesson, where she learned the fundamentals of lean manufacturing, a process that eliminates waste. She has a passion for design and architecture and merged that with her manufacturing background to start her business. Next up, we have Chris Lee. He's the head of design and development at Backyard ADUs, which focuses on making it easier for people to build small homes, both in backyards and on standalone plots. He's been heavily focused on easing the zoning hurdles to create more affordable building lots, smaller dwellings, and to identify ways to reduce the costs of new construction to make it available to everyone. He lives in Brunswick with his wife, dog, and new daughter. Next up, we have Parlin Meyer. She's the director of BrightBuilt Home, a design firm in Portland, Maine, that uses off-site construction manufacturers to build modified and custom versions of its high-performance home designs. After 10 years at sea as a licensed captain and deck officer, Parlin began a second career in the built environment by pursuing both a Master's of Architecture and a Master's of Real Estate Development from the University of Maryland. And last but not least, we have Nancy Smith, who joined GrowSmart Maine as the executive director in April of 2010. Her work at GrowSmart Maine supports communities in creating sustainable communities. Well-sited small homes can be important components of smart growth because they provide housing choices for people of diverse ages, income levels, and family status to thrive in the community that they choose as their hometown. So welcome to all of our panelists. Thank you for being here. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Corinne to kick off the presentations.
I'm Corinne, the owner of Tiny Homes of Maine, and we'll go through a few slides here. Next. So what is a tiny home? If you've been following along, you may or may not know that we had some legislation passed in 2020 to define exactly what a tiny home is. And you can look that up in Maine law. The bill was called LD 1981. And the definition is a tiny home means a living space permanently constructed on a frame or chassis and is designed for use as a permanent living quarter. It needs to comply with the National Standard Institute, which is 119.5 on plumbing, propane, fire, and life safety. It also needs, or it can also meet the National Fire Protection Association standard 1192. A tiny home cannot exceed 400 square feet in size, it cannot exceed any dimension allowed for operation on a public way, and it is a vehicle without motive power. A tiny home is not a trailer, semi-trailer, camp trailer, recreational vehicle, or manufactured housing. So there is a definition, and that's what it is. Next. So a lot of people ask who are interested in tiny homes, who are buying tiny homes. This is just a screenshot from some of our social media insights. So as you can see, it's a wide range of demographic, male, female, young, middle-aged, older folks. So it's everyone. That wasn't always true. This seems to be kind of a post-pandemic type of demographic. Before the pandemic, it was in our experience, the people buying tiny homes from us were mostly single women in their 50s and 60s, but that has changed. Next. So if you're tuning in, interested in tiny homes and ADUs, I'm sure you can guess what some of the benefits are. Affordability. A lot of folks are looking to retire and enjoy retirement. There's lots of flexibility with tiny homes. You can keep aging parents nearby. It can be temporary housing, student housing, also a vacation home. That's another post-pandemic experience we're having, is a lot of people are buying tiny homes to rent out as Airbnb for that extra rental income. And also a lot of people are trying to come up with different ways to make a living. So not only are tiny homes being used as homes, but also alternative businesses. Like we've done a dental unit, tiny spa for a massage therapist and things like that. And also we get a lot of inquiries for parents who would like to keep their adult children nearby with them. Next. So, I've been advocating for tiny homes for 7 years now, and we have broken some of the barriers, but these are just a few. Finding a place to put it, that's probably the major one. We have come quite a ways in Maine, but we get a lot of inquiries from several states and municipalities throughout New England and the country. So I sit on the board of Tiny Home Industry Association, and I'm trying to help break those barriers in other regions as well. So even though we've had some legislation passed, not only the definition, but now all municipalities shall permit tiny homes, there's, that still needs to catch up that information to local zoning and code folks. So we spend a lot of time educating and spreading awareness of that legislation that's in place. And then also financing. Some people are able to pay cash, some people have credit that's good enough so they can get a loan, but that isn't the case for a lot of people that are looking for something more affordable. So we are also working on different financing options to help folks who don't qualify for the existing options that are available. Next. So some of the common issues, I think that people probably share some frustrations if they've tried to convince their municipality they'd like to place a tiny home, they get some resistance. So these are some of the common issues that we've had experience with trying to help our clients work through. And I'm happy to say that it's frustrating for sure, but there hasn't been one scenario that we haven't been able to work through with local code and zoning folks. So it's again, just spreading that awareness and educating people on what is possible, and hopefully opening their mind to be more flexible with how they're interpreting codes and zoning rules in their municipality. So for instance, just to name a couple issues here, we designed and built a tiny home for a couple that were placing it in St. George, Maine. So a lot of our tiny homes go out with Nature's Head composting toilet. Well, for whatever reason, that code enforcement officer really had an issue because Nature's Head was a brand that was not on the state's approved product list, which hasn't been updated in several years. So that in that case, they were very, very persistent on insisting that these folks have a Sunmar composting toilet. So at the last minute, we had to switch out their type of composting toilet. And then, you know, they were happy with that. In another case, you know, we build tiny homes with the flexibility of having a 50 amp connection, a 100 amp, or a 200 amp. It's kind of whatever the client is looking for. Well, a lot of towns are saying, you know, their code person or building inspector are saying that if it's going to be a permanent dwelling, it needs to have a minimum 100 amp service. So we just went ahead and have all units go out with that minimum 100 amp service just to avoid any issues there. So that's just to name a few in detail, but we do come across a lot of these issues, and it's time consuming, it's frustrating, but the good news is that we have been able to work through all of them. Next. So we all know prices are going up. That shouldn't be any surprise to anyone. That's the case with our tiny homes as well. We are trying to implement a lot of lean manufacturing principles to try to eliminate some of the costs associated to bring that price point back down where it's affordable for more people. So we do have some programs that we're working on to bring our prices down. Now, our units are considered a personal property until they're affixed to land. So you don't have that variability of it being real estate. So that the prices aren't going to change based on location. So that's what's kind of nice about our tiny homes. Next. So this was just a cute graphic that probably people have seen that I thought we would throw in here just to give you a sense of what homes are being sold for and kind of what you could get for equivalent to that price point. So just kind of a fun little graphic. Next. So just to name some things that we're working on, we get so many calls and emails every day from individuals, organizations, trying to help people, not only people who sleep outside, but people that are just trying to help folks be able to have a high quality, low cost home that they can afford to live in. But this is one initiative, is this shelter unit that we designed, and this was actually Burlington, Vermont reached out to us some time ago looking to purchase some shelter units, and then we kind of used that model to work with other municipalities throughout Maine to help with folks, you know, having a safe, warm place to sleep at night. So this is something that I'm very passionate about, and that we hope we can help a lot of municipalities throughout Maine with these shelter units. Next. So my contact info is here. I know we're gonna have some questions at the end, but I'm always happy to help with anyone having issues or questions with you know, tiny homes and placement, or any projects you have going on. So feel free to contact me anytime. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Corinne.
Yeah.
And
All right, I think, I don't know if I got muted, but I think I'm up. Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Lee, and I'm head of design and development and the original founder of Backyard ADUs. We started the company just over 2 years ago with the goal of helping people build small homes in their backyards, primarily thinking that we were going to be building a lot of lower price rental units. But quickly found out that we were going to build a lot of homes for people's parents. And then soon after that, figured out that we're just going to help people build small homes wherever they want small homes. And it's been a really exciting journey in Maine and in Massachusetts. And currently we're based out of Brunswick. So what I'd like to do is take probably 5 or 10 minutes and just kind of talk through some neat things that we've been seeing really across New England, where we're primarily building these based on who's building them, why they're building them, and some really neat opportunities for small homes and bringing costs down. All right. All right. So ADUs and small homes in Maine. So kind of a neat thing that we've seen as we've been working on this is that a lot of people that we've spoken to have started to use the term ADU and small home as the same thing. Of course, ADUs is zoning speak and means building a detached or an attached structure, basically a secondary unit, typically in the back of a single family home. But now in the case of Portland, it can be an extra unit attached to any residential structure. So it could be a third unit on a 2-family, a 6th unit on a 5-family, a 2nd unit on a single family, and it can have all kinds of different forms. But of course, ADUs are not all of what's going on right now. There's a huge movement, as Corinne was kind of alluding to. People are just interested in going smaller. The traditional house that was built over the last 20 or 30 years, averaging 2,700 square feet, it's just not what people want anymore. And at this point, we've just got too many large houses, and people are starting to downsize and starting to look initially less than 2,000 square feet. But especially with people who are downsizing and trying to age in place, they're trying to build less than 1,300 square feet, typically 2 or 3 bedrooms. And in Maine, there's a lot of small homes. If you drive around rural areas, you'll see one of the like an original mobile home, which might only be 700 or 800 square feet, but it serves as a great place for somebody to live. Or you can see something that like a small Cape style house that might be 1,000 square feet. We just haven't seen a lot of those built in the last 30 years, but we're experiencing a bit of a renaissance. Next. So why now? From what we've seen, really one of the biggest factors in why we're dealing with small homes now is basically a demographic divide. So we've got children and their parents that are basically split on an age where the parents are old enough to want to downsize, their kids are out, but their children are also at an age where they're starting to have kids. And it's creating this perfect storm of consolidating households, which is what's driving the backyard home and ADU movement. But it's also driving a lot of new home construction. We've been building a lot of small homes for people's parents who are moving closer to their kids, just building them as standalone houses. They don't need a giant house with a big basement. They just want 1,000 square feet and typically an extra bedroom for their grandkids to come stay in. Next. Also, why now? Everybody who watches the news or is thinking about building knows that construction costs have gone haywire. When we kicked this off, we started the company right before the pandemic hit. We finished our first house right when everything started shutting down. It was quite the experience. But at that point, we were building at prices that were closer to be considered affordable to a lot of people. And at this point, as you can see, we're stretching that. And they're at levels where they're affordable with a mortgage, but not necessarily otherwise. And this house is the first house that we built in Maine. It was an ADU in Scarborough that we built for the homeowner's daughter to live in with her son. And she now lives there with her boyfriend as well. So they're kind of expanding, and they may even finish the second floor in that Cape style. And this house, when we built it for $175,000, including some septic work and some well upgrades. And unfortunately, now it's gone up almost 30%. And that is primarily driven by costs of materials and increasingly now fluctuations in labor prices, which is arguably a good thing, seeing people make more money, but it's not keeping up in line with everyone else's income who is trying to buy one of these houses. Next. And then finally, why now? So upzoning is happening everywhere. We've got the opportunity to participate and see towns change their zoning across Massachusetts and New Hampshire and in Maine, and it's super exciting. I think the best local example that we have right now is Portland. What Portland did in terms of updating their ADU bylaw, basically put it at the top tier of all towns in New England, and in the same level of like Portland, Oregon. So it's leading the pack in New England, and they actually allow everyone to build 2 ADUs in their backyard. So if you have a 1,200 square foot house, you could actually go and drop 2 tiny homes or 2 small homes, as long as they meet building code, in your backyard and use them as rentals. It's quite neat. And another thing outside of ADUs that's going on right now, towns are starting to allow people to subdivide lots and create smaller lots. It's happening in Portland. You'll see lots of people cutting off their side yard, selling that, creating a more affordable building lot so someone can build a small home. And then another really neat thing we've done, we haven't seen this in Maine yet, but we've seen it elsewhere, where towns are allowing bonus density if you build small units. So if you agree to build 800 square foot apartments, you can build twice as many as if you're going to build a 2,000 square foot condo. Northampton, Mass, I think, was the first town to do this in New England. And then Conway, New Hampshire actually had a public meeting last week to move some stuff forward that's going to allow a lot of small lot subdivisions and micro units to happen. Very, very exciting. Brunswick, I'll mention too, has a really good open space development and a good planning board that allows this kind of stuff to happen as well. Next. So now I'm just going to kind of go through and talk about who's building these, because I think it's really neat to see what people are actually doing in their backyards and who they're doing it for, and then some of the challenges that you run into. So this is an 850 square foot, 2-bedroom, 2 full bathroom ADU, and it's built behind a main house, and it was for a young man who had just turned 24 with Down syndrome, and for a roommate who's also going to be a care provider for him to live. And this was a neat one. There were some really neat access constraints. We had to back a 70-foot long by 15-foot trailer into a backyard with about 4 inches to spare between the side of the house and a big tree. And then there was some stuff that had to be dealt with a septic pump and water issues, but ultimately it got done. And it's a wonderful place for Aiden to live. And the landscaping too this spring is going to be absolutely phenomenal. Next. So here's another one. This was a 650 square foot ADU, also built in a backyard, and it was for a grandmother. She actually moved back to the US from Israel to live closer to her kids and to her grandchildren, who are, I believe they're 8 and 12. And this ADU was actually funded by a really neat program that Maine needs to get on board with, that gave the family $50,000 of zero interest deferred repayment money to help the grandmother age in place. And this is a fully wheelchair accessible one, despite that giant staircase. There's a ramp that goes up back. And everything inside is accessible. But I don't know if anyone on the call is in policy and thinking about things to do at the state level, deferred loan programs to help people pay for some of this stuff is enormous, and it would immensely help families build and help offset the cost of construction. Next. So this is actually something that we did in Brunswick. We did a subdivision using Brunswick's open space development and we created 6 small lots on 26 acres. And we're going to be building, we've already built 2 of the houses and we're building 4 more, all of which are less than 1,300 square feet. And they're people that are moving in. It's a mix of young families in their 30s. And then single professionals who are unmarried. So it's kind of a neat example of just showing demographics where families of 4 still don't necessarily want a huge house. And it's not just because they can't afford it. And people are making the decision to just build small, because when you build small, it's relatively easy to create a net zero house with solar. And it's a heck of a lot easier to clean. And this is a neat photo of one of the modular techniques we've been working on to try to get more vaulted ceilings and interesting features into the houses. Next. Here's actually the first home we ever did. So this was for a grandmother. Very simple design. It's one of the least expensive things we can do. And it's 525 square feet. It's 1 bedroom. It's on a frost protected crawl space. Frost protected shallow crawl space. And it's right in her daughter's backyard. So she's got enough space for her. Her grandkids can run across the backyard about 75 yards and end up in her living room. And then she can go over there to the bigger dining room when she needs to. Next. And this is a neat example. So this is not an ADU. This is a standalone house that we did for a retiree. He actually moved to Maine from New Jersey. And he's net zero, and he only pays taxes and tops him to live here. And his primary requirements in the build was keep the cost as low as possible, keep snow off my car, and he wanted everything to be gray. He was a lot of fun to work with. But he bought this lot, and it was a lot that was carved off from a 3-family home. So it was a really nice infill opportunity. And he probably got the only walkable lot in southern Maine for under $100,000 when he bought this 2 years ago. And now he walks to downtown Brunswick. He walks to dinner. He walks to Hannaford and a Home Depot, which he probably shouldn't, because it's kind of a sketchy street to go all the way down there in Topsom. But he's loving it. Next. And then finally, in closing, we've talked about costs a lot. One of the things that we are just starting to work on kind of in response to people asking us, and to really find a way to drive costs down, is to start providing DIY shells and providing a lot of support to help people finish them. That way people can save project management costs and general contracting overhead, which ends up being anywhere from like 13 to 25% of the cost of the install of a offsite built home. And in dollar terms, can easily save 15 to 30 grand without even starting to think about what do you save by painting your own house, doing your own siding, putting flooring in, things that there's a lot of people that can do with a little bit of support. So this is brand new. If you go to our website, backyardadus.com, there's a announcement bar on there, and you could sign up to get some more information on this. But we reckon we could get a small home starting at about 80 to 90,000, which doesn't include a foundation, but we have ways that can help you get that in and keep that cost down as well. And I'm ending again. My name is Chris Lee. I'm the head of design and development at Backyard ADUs. We're based out of Brunswick, and we're exclusively focused on building small homes and trying to make them less expensive, even with high design. And you can get in touch with us on our website, or you can email me at info@backyardadus.com.
I'm going to go ahead and jump in. Heather had asked that I just go ahead and do that without introduction and transitions because she's having difficulty with her audio. But thanks to both Corinne and Chris for their intros thus far and the content that they've presented. And also thanks to my other co-presenter, Nancy, who will be presenting after me. And to Heather and Rain for putting this together. And thanks to everyone who's joining us tonight to learn more about small homes and tiny homes. So my name is Parlin Meyer. I'm director of BrightBuilt Home. We're based here in Portland, Maine. And the image you see here on the screen right now is an image of the BrightBuilt barn, which was effectively the granddaddy project to the BrightBuilt Home initiative. This was completed in 2009. Was a collaboration of a number of different innovative entities, as well as our sister firm, Kaplan Thompson Architects, and really was what planted the seed that germinated into what became BrightBuilt Home. Next. So BrightBuilt Home, from its outset in 2013 to its present day, has focused largely in the realm of the single family home dwelling. So anywhere from 1,300 to 2,700 square feet. So sort of that middle range freestanding single family home that specifically has the agenda of being net zero and being very high performance, so very efficient structures. But about 4 years ago now, we decided to launch our Sidekick line, which is focused in that small home realm. We were interested in pursuing a lot of the same areas of interest that Chris spoke to, and Corinne also addressed with tiny homes, where we were anticipating just a groundswell of interest in accessory dwelling units, because we were seeing housing constraints. We were seeing a lot of different constraints that were confronting a lot of different folks in the marketplace. And we really anticipated some interest in the accessory dwelling unit marketplace. And like Chris, what we discovered was, initially at any rate, people were largely coming to us for building small freestanding homes. They were less compelled by the backyard scenario and more just wanting a smaller footprint, wanting something that was more efficient, wanting something that they could live in, that didn't take up so much of their time, space, or bank account. So next. So what we started to see was, it's not just about accessory dwelling units, it's also about freestanding homes. But in the ADU department, this is a little redundant to what's already been presented, but certainly multi-generational housing, short-term rental option, a vehicle for providing homeowners with some monthly rental or passive rental income, And then as we've seen more in the last 2 years, having a space that's an away space from the main home or an accessory office space for working from home. As a freestanding home, what we're really seeing is, that interest in a smaller footprint, efficient use of space, having a smaller carbon footprint. And then of course here in Maine, we do see some interest in the vacation rental, whether that's a lakeside camp or something near one of the ski mountains. Certainly at the very beginning of COVID, and I would imagine Chris and Corinne saw some similar interest. We saw a lot of interest in folks who wanted essentially an escape remote location where they could get out of a denser urban setting and have a space that they felt was a little bit more remote. And certainly with remote work, that's become a more prevalent notion. Next. So like Chris, I actually titled a couple of my slides, Why Now? We are seeing a greater level of interest in these homes, smaller homes and accessory dwelling units. Home equity has increased substantially. So folks have equity that they've built up just from the sheer increase in value of their residence. And not only do they have this increased equity, but they're finding that with the home values having increased to the degree that they have, they may be able to realize more value in their home if they resell it, but then they can't really necessarily afford to buy anything else in the area. So a way for them to generate some value or some instantaneous value out of that additional equity is to take out a home equity loan and put in an accessory dwelling unit and then be able to realize some passive income while also further increasing the value of their property by adding additional structures to it. So certainly that is a big driver for homeowners to really take advantage of some of those value increases that they've seen in recent years. The ADU regulations, this is something that Chris spoke to specifically, and definitely a lot of the municipalities in the area are really stepping up and doing some great things. One thing we did see over the course of the last few years was some interesting trends. So probably 4 or 5 years ago, there were some forward-thinking cities and towns that were really getting aggressive with instituting some good ADU regulations. And then within about a couple of years of that, there was an interesting backlash from that was born out of communities that were worried about, and in many cases had valid concerns about short-term rentals and Airbnbs coming in and disrupting their community settings. And so there were regulations that were then imposed that actually made ADUs more difficult or more regulated in some towns because of the short-term rental backlash. One thing I will say, which is really interesting, I just learned actually the White House hosted a webinar on ADUs today, interestingly enough. And one of the presenters had a slide about the cross-section of ADU homeowners and what the percentage of uses were across a survey group that was based in the Pacific Northwest in the case of this study. So I don't have a slide on this, unfortunately, because it was just from today. But what they found in this survey of existing ADU owners in the Pacific Northwest was that 39% of them were using them for long-term rentals. So they were renting to, people they didn't know ahead of time that came and were just doing a long-term rental agreement with them. 24% were renting to family members or using them as multi-generational housing. And only 11% were using them for short-term rental. So that was a really interesting revelation, certainly for me, and really points to the potential and some of the data that's out there now to make the case for towns that have reticence or concerns about making ADU regulatory, lessening the regulatory barriers to ADUs. So really encouraging developments in a number of sectors in this for small homes and for ADUs. So yeah, other drivers that we're really seeing right now is a lack of inventory out there for housing, both rental and for sale. So And that applies to both ADUs and the freestanding smaller homes. So with regard to home buyers who are looking to buy a home, there's really a lack of inventory for sale at the moment. And the opportunity to build what you want and build something efficient with a smaller footprint is really appealing to a lot of folks. And the smaller size, of course, as Chris spoke to, also makes it a more affordable prospect for a construction project. And then, of course, there's their environmental motivators. So getting to net zero, having a reduced carbon footprint, building a home that is not going to use any fossil fuels, and the long-term durability of a high-performance assembly. Next. So like Chris, I wanted to do just sort of a quick tour of some of the different projects that we've done, or some of the different designs that we have available that really have endeavored to address some of the different needs we're seeing in the marketplace. So there's the studio one, studio with a full bath and full kitchen for 420 square feet, which is great for potentially either a short-term marketplace or more of that office space or smaller structure in the back yard that you might use for not longer term occupation per se. And I'm actually going to go through the next few slides. So this is just a summary slide, and in the recording, you know, folks can look at this more closely just to get a sense of the different size ranges of different designs that we have and projects that we've done. I'll start to go through them quickly, just to, again, do sort of a tour to give a sense of the different folks that are interested in these homes and how that might be a relatable story for others. So next. So this is that 14 by 30 foot, 420 square foot option. It's essentially a studio living space with a full kitchen and a full bath. We have yet to build one of these actually, but it's part of our original design portfolio with the sidekicks. Next. This is our sidekick cottage. This was based on one of the original designs that was launched for our sidekick initiative. This is 560 to 756 square feet, depending on if it's the 1 or 2 bedroom version. This particular home was built for a grandmother, essentially saying a similar story to one of the ones that Chris shared, where the grandmother had moved to the area to be closer to her adult children and grandchildren. But it was a freestanding home on its own lot. So it wasn't built as an accessory dwelling unit. Next. This one is essentially the 2-bedroom, 770 square foot option with a full vaulted ceiling. So allows for a larger sense of space, even though it's on still a smaller footprint. And as you can see, in this case, it also had a daylight walkout basement condition. So these can, you know, and Chris showed a couple examples of these, and Corinne also referred to the notion of being able to be built either in a more kind of transient type setting where it's built on piers or built in a chassis in the case of a tiny home, or you can also build on a full foundation. So you can gain a little bit of additional square footage while still maintaining a small footprint, and get square footage out of the foundational elements that you're going to need to have anyway for the home. Next. So this is a version of our camp, which actually has an 18-foot wide width, which is wider than most off-site built structures wider than what most can be built to, and it can only be built in Maine because it exceeds most of the state regulatory requirements or limits for width. But this is a version shown here where the vaulted space is essentially a vaulted space with, you can get ladder access up to a flat platform loft if you so choose. In this case, the homeowners were an elderly couple that, in fact, their neighbor helped fund this project for them. So their neighbor helped build a 2-bedroom, 1-bath home with a screen porch, and you can see the little access ramp there going up, so it's wheelchair accessible, and the neighbor wanted to build this for her elderly neighbors. Next. And then this is the interior of the camp with the stairs to a bedroom on the 2nd floor. So this is a total of just over 1,100 square feet. And it can be a 2 to 3 bedroom, 1 to 2 bath program. So this is on the larger end of the Sidekick designs. And this particular project was done as essentially a vacation home for the family that's going to be the future retirement home for the couple that built it. So currently they bought the property and built it. They're going to potentially rent it and use it for vacation purposes, and then likely will retire into this home. So we do have, I'll scroll them through them quickly, but the subsequent designs are designs that are currently in development and or soon to be built, depending on the project. Our next slide is the carriage house, which is essentially a 27 by 32 foot footprint above a 2-car garage. So combining elements in the case of this family that's going to be building this, where they're actually building this now. They're buying the property and building this to live in now, and then going to build the larger primary home and then turn this into an accessory dwelling unit once the primary home is completed. Next. This is our Sidekick stack, which is it's a more compact footprint, 18 by 32, 2 stories, so 2 bedroom, 1.5 bath with a larger living space on the first floor. We've talked about doing this for some different initiatives for pocket neighborhoods and things like that. It's kind of akin to the project Chris described in Brunswick that they're working on. So it's good for those sort of more compact, smaller lots, but still getting some larger living spaces out of a smaller footprint. Next. This is just a variation on the architectural aesthetics of some of our other designs. So 784 square feet, 14 by 56. Next. And here again is another design. This was a concept that was developed for a client who was looking to build, she worked overseas and she wanted to build a small home that she could retire to after finishing her work in working for various NGOs overseas. So she wanted a home that had a little bit more of a modern aesthetic to it, but was still a smaller footprint and was net zero. Next. This is a project, I didn't have any images, but we're working on an initiative just like Chris and Corinne also are, that is getting at the notion of having a prescribed and very specific form and module that will ideally be able to be offered at a very affordable price point to really get at the marketplace and the sector within the marketplace that's, or keep saying marketplace, but really just homeowners, renters, people who are looking for housing. So the housing market is really in need of these options out here that can be attained at affordable price between the cost increases in manufacturing and materials and just the extreme rent increases and everything else. The housing crisis is real. So everybody's really thinking hard about how to help resolve some of these issues. And next. So yeah, this was just a summary slide. This is a photo of a home that's actually out on peaks. So that went out on peaks on a barge, which was pretty fun to see crossing Casco Bay last summer. But yeah, so we're trying to address the market from 3,000 to 1,500 square feet and thinking hard about how best to really address the efficient space question and cost questions as best we can. Next. All right, this is my closing slide. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what Nancy has to share about the legislation, some of the regulatory considerations around these smaller homes. My information will be shared, I think, in the follow-up with the email and the recording. But again, I'm Parlin Meyer. I'm director for BrightBuilt Home, and brightbuilthome.com is our website if you're interested in reaching out. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll take it from here. I am Nancy Smith, Executive Director of GrowSmart, and I'll be picking this up from the policy perspective. Small houses under the dome, of course, referring to the beautiful copper dome that sits above the State House, where all of the action happens at the state level in policy. Next. I want to make the point that what we're talking about here is smart growth, that GrowSmart Maine supports communities in managing change. We've heard a lot tonight about how municipalities are weighing in. And our advocacy is targeted at unique niches where land use implications for quality of life, the economy, and the environment come together. And small homes certainly fit this description. For instance, when we talk about aging in place, oftentimes people want to age in their homes, but if they could age in their hometowns, that would be almost as good. And there just aren't options to do that, which is what tonight we're addressing. Density in housing, particularly you're talking about tonight about infill, when these small homes are added to existing lots, it helps municipal budgets, especially when they're placed where there's already municipal infrastructure. Think about roads, sewer and water, broadband, school buses, and emergency services. And as you've heard several times tonight, the climate implications, the climate benefits are very real as we're looking at both the reduced need for single occupancy vehicles for daily living as people are living in these houses closer together in villages, downtowns, and cities. And as you've heard, fewer resources are needed to build, maintain, and heat and cool these homes. Next. You've heard, of course, the policy implications. Why are we here? You know, a 17% increase in median prices and a restriction on the volume of sales simply because there isn't enough stock. When we look at both the state statute and the municipal regulations, these have a huge impact on your choices, on what you can do along these lines. And you've been listening tonight to a little bit of the history of some of the challenges that have come about. I'm going to end my fairly short presentation by talking about and sharing links to resources. I want to help you stay current and share your thinking as legislation moves forward. Next. So let me give you a little bit of a background. First, with tiny houses. In recent past legislation, Corinne mentioned, I think this is when I met her, it was in 2020, with a bill that was an act to regard regulation of tiny houses was simply about being able to move them from where they were manufactured to where they had been purchased and people were waiting to move in. Corinne outlined the definition of the house, but primarily this was in the Department of Transportation, and it amended their regulations to allow for the transport for limited reasons, and also requires that the tiny houses have to be safe for transit. And then in 2021, LD 1530, an act to allow people to live in tiny houses. There have been conversations and questions about this. This bill passed, and it allows people to live in tiny houses either as the primary or the accessory dwelling in any municipality. It's anywhere where single family dwelling is allowed. Nothing new specific to tiny houses in 2022, but there's more that I'll touch on in a minute. Next. Accessory dwelling units. You know, these used to be the granny pads or the in-law apartments. These aren't new in Maine, but they are certainly increasing across the state. And certainly what you heard earlier, I would echo that there was a lot of interest, suddenly new interest in them. And that brought about LD 1312, which as written would have, it would have allowed ADUs wherever single family dwellings are allowed, but with some fairly tight restrictions on them. GrowSmart Maine worked with Maine Municipal Association on an amendment that would have had some restrictions, really focusing on some of the most critical. And you heard again, short-term rentals were a big concern on what that would do for the sense of a feeling of community. This bill was tabled at the end of last session, most likely because they knew that the Housing Commission recommendations were percolating. Next. In 2021, there was this commission to increase housing opportunities in Maine by studying zoning and land use restrictions. The resolve passed in 2021. The commission did their work in 2021, and we're now waiting for the bill to move forward. There will be legislation that takes these recommendations, sponsored by House Speaker Ryan Fecteau, who brought forward the commission in the first place. There are 9 recommendations. The first one is to allow accessory dwelling units by right in all zoning districts currently zoned for single-family homes. This, of the 9 recommendations, was very strongly endorsed by the people on the commission, and I think has a very strong chance of success as it moves forward. The bill hasn't been printed yet. We don't know what it says yet. They said sometime in February, so I'm tracking that one closely to see how we can support many of the recommendations that are there. Next. My goal in this portion of my time with you is to encourage you to explore online resources and find a way to engage in the legislative process. You've heard from the folks that are building these amazing choices that sometimes there are restrictions to it. I'm not telling you where to stand on a bill, nor do I really highlight where GrowSmart is on the bill. I just want you to get involved. You can find that there are the bills online. You can read the bills. You can read submitted written testimony. You can watch the proceedings on YouTube now. So I would ask you to consider how many of you know your state representative and your state senator. How many of you know that they know you and who you are? Now is a great time to reach out to them and present yourself as a resource. They are making recommendations and having to vote on hundreds of issues now, and your expertise and your perspective matter. For most legislators on most issues, if they get 3 phone calls, it's a landslide. So you really can have make a difference here in Maine. I want to run through these links quickly. At the top, and when you get the PDF from all of us, hopefully we'll find a way. These are live links that you could be able to look at. GrowSmart Maine has a public policy page. You can look at our testimony, and I put out regular updates. If there's one page you're going to explore, it's the legislative homepage. This is where you can learn about what the committees are doing. You can find calendars for committees and for the House and Senate, and you can find, again, your representative and your senator. The next 2, the simplified version, the detailed version. If you really want to know how a bill becomes law, the one thing to remember is that the public hearing is not the end, it's the beginning of the process. And there are great ways to engage before a public hearing, during, and after. The Law and Legislative Reference Library is an incredible resource. Physically, it's located in the State House under the dome, but it's available for residents in addition to lawmakers. They can do research for you. They can help you gain information. They don't offer advice, but there's a wealth of information, and I encourage you to check them out as well. And finally here, I'm noting that GrowSmart has a local outreach and advocacy community guide to help you on the municipal level, how to be successful when you're trying to either support change or implement change along the way. And if you'd go to the next, which is my last slide, one that I want to take a minute is to explore, because people have asked questions about this tonight, is our community guide on accessory dwelling units and affordable home strategy. So I would ask, is it Rainey whose screen we're using? If you would, oh, please tell me they still have the internet there. Okay, so she has clicked on the link, thank you. This is the page with our community guides. If you scroll down, you'll see there's a variety there. One more, except right there. Nope, scroll back up a bit. Right there. So accessory apartments, if you click on the learn more, you'll be able to see, this is a 2-page PDF that you can read or print off. It talks about what accessory dwelling units are, what the advantages are of them, and some of the implications, some of the challenges that you may see. So I invite you to read through that to get more of the specifics. And then if you could go back to that earlier link, the one that you were just at. So go to the tab there. And then it's funny, I'm pointing at my screen. At the bottom where it says, check out this ADU ordinance table. This we updated, we got it up on our website this afternoon. This is current as of January of 2022. This is a compilation of ADU ordinances about their allowed use, whether the owner occupied is a requirement for the principal or the accessory unit. Do they allow detached, or does it have to be attached, in any other notes? This is, I think, it's 5 pages long, alphabetical by town, and again, updated as of last week. So I encourage you to check it out, and you'll be able to see if your town has accessory dwelling unit ordinances. And again, pay attention to what's going on. It will be in the newspapers when the Housing Commission recommendations come out, and look for what they are recommending at a state level for allowing ADUs. Those are the comments that I have to share. The one last point I wanted to hit on, Chris mentioned if somebody wanted to do something about policy, deferred loans, go to Maine Housing's website last week. They announced an affordable housing deferred loan program that's part of the federal money coming to Maine. And certainly there are a lot of smart growth requirements built into their programming, and this may be a fit for it for developers that are looking this way. Looking forward to questions, and thanks so much for the chance to be a part of this with everyone.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, everyone, for your patience on my audio issues. I'm hoping that they are fixed now, and I'm so glad to see that that chart was updated, Nancy. That is a super, super helpful resource, so thank you for sharing that. And we'll definitely include all of the links in our follow-up email, so we can share those as well. And at this time, we're going to move into the Q&A portion of the evening. And let's see, I'm going to start with what options for gray water disposal what are the options for gray water disposal for tiny homes and ADUs? Our code officer says that the state of Maine requires a minimum of 2-bedroom septic, even just for gray water. Is that true? Who wants to take that one?
I can help. I can share what we have experienced. So just on a kind of general note that although there are rules, there's subsurface wastewater rules that are very hard to find on maine.gov, that's still at the discretion of the local code enforcement officer or local plumbing inspector. So no matter what those rules say, it's still at their discretion on what they say needs to be done. Unfortunately, whether that's right or wrong, that's been our experience. So when we place tiny homes, some people have a flushing toilet and have a full septic system, but a lot of people do choose a composting toilet. So the gray water, the engineered gray water system is very similar to just having a leach field minus the septic tank. So that is true that the rules do specify a minimum 2-bedroom size for gray water or septic system, either one. So those rules are ancient. They haven't been updated probably since they have been created. So there is some opportunity to update that through rulemaking or possibly even legislation. So there's definitely some opportunity there.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Next question, does a tiny home meet MUBEC standards? Will a tiny home meet municipal ADU requirements?
There's no short answer for that. So tiny homes on wheels as defined in Maine law do not fall under the jurisdiction of building codes or inspections. So although we do follow MUBEC and we build to that standard, there's no requirements for inspection or certification to those standards. So when a home's placed in a municipality, the code officer or a building inspector should not have any concern about how the tiny home is built, just how it's connected to utilities.
Great, thank you. All right, what is the average cost to build a tiny home in Maine? And once built, I guess we're having a lot of tiny home questions. Once built, what are the average utility costs?
I mean, that it's so difficult to answer cost questions because a tiny home on wheels, I mean, the steel chassis that we build upon is probably a third of the cost. That is the foundation, and the tiny home is permanently attached to that steel chassis. So, you know, building a tiny home not on wheels will be less expensive than building a movable tiny home. You know, and it could range from 20,000 to 100,000+ depending on personal preference, whether you're paying somebody for labor or building it yourself. So the cost question is always tough because it depends on a lot of things. And what was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
Which one was this? Once built, what are the average utility costs?
We've reached out to our customers living in tiny homes. So depending on usage, typically our tiny homes at least are all electric with a mini split heat pump. So it could range from the minimum CMP bill of $15 a month, you know, up to $50 a month, you know, and some people obviously consume more energy if they have a hot tub, or maybe they have their heat or their AC cranked all the time. So it's pretty low. You know, I would say $15 to $50 a month for lights, heat, everything.
I can add some color to the cost question for stuff that's a little bit bigger too. So I alluded to when I was talking, costs have gone up a lot. We're still seeing a 525 square foot single bedroom home. We can get that built for $150,000 to $160,000. So it ends up being like $600 to $700 a month if you finance it with a mortgage. That price point assumes that utilities are already stubbed. So you've got a septic or a city sewer connection that you can hook up to. You've got a water connection that works. And we're not going to be doing lots and lots of trenching to get power in. If those things don't exist, a 2-bedroom septic that doesn't have a septic pump is costing between $8,000 and $11,000 right now. If you need a septic pump, which just means you're going uphill or you have to have a mounted system, that usually adds about like $3,000 to $5,000. And then if you need to drill a well costs right now are between $10,000 and $15,000. Affordable well drilling out of Sabatis does them for $7,500, but you never really know when they're going to show up. But you do get a deal. But the interesting thing I think about costs of small and tiny homes, especially when they're going to be permanently docked somewhere on a foundation, is that the cost of the structure itself makes up less than 50% of the cost of the home. So if we're building a 500 square foot small home, above the foundation might only cost $100,000. And then you could quickly drop another $100,000 prepping the site. So you run into this really weird situation where your cost per square feet doesn't quite explain the cost very well, because we get the question all the time, what's the cost per square foot? It's like, well, the cost per square foot of a 500 square foot home is $400 a square foot, but the cost per square foot of $1,000 square foot home drops down to 300 or under. So it's an interesting thing. And as everybody knows, it's really hard to pull cost figures out of builders. But it's important to dig into that information. And honestly, it's extremely hard to give right now. It's extremely difficult to give because it does feel like costs change on a monthly basis. And it used to be just lumber and flooring and siding, but now you're not quite sure what the electrician's going to charge. But anyway, circling back, 500 square foot home still can get done for 150 to 160,000. If you bring that up to 800 square feet, you're going over 200,000, and it's like 200 to 230 depending on site conditions.
Great, thank you. There's a question about building on piers, and I know that somebody mentioned that in a presentation. I think it might have been you, Parlin. So the question was, how would a raised pier type house work?
So in our case, the structure itself would not be modified other than to say that the floor plate would be insulated and sealed from the exterior. So we would essentially wrap the entire perimeter of the house on all sides with the weather resistant barrier akin to what you would use on the walls or roof. And that would then get set down onto either beams or plates on either sonotubes or frost protected piers, or in some cases helical piers. Helical piers are essentially like large ground screws with brackets on them that can be screwed into the ground depending on the soil conditions and act very similarly to a frost protected pier or a sonotube. So really, really similar approach to what you would have with a frost protected foundation, crawl space, or frost wall, but just the isolated pier. So it makes for a lighter touch on the ground. It's less cost and less just site work essentially to prep for that. The one factor would be that the stubs, all the water lines and utility lines would be centralized into a core that's usually accessed through a panel within the structure.
Great, thank you. There's a question about permits and whether they change if the intention is to rent out the home. So it doesn't specify whether it's asking about tiny homes or ADUs, but is that a question someone can answer?
Yeah, I could. There aren't typically different permits for renting it versus having it be for a family member. Towns may just not allow it, may just not allow you to rent it. They may have family only laws. I believe Wells is an example that is a family only law. South Berwick might be another one. But it's basically you can do it or you can't do it. It's not typically a separate permit process. So it is what it is. Some towns need to get on the bandwagon.
I would add that's part of, I mean, this is very much in motion with the bill that's going to be coming forward in the legislature, where right now, you know, we needed a 5-page table to outline all of the places with different rules, but the need for consistency and the need to allow this housing choice. One of the questions I saw was, you know, what's the difference? Can a tiny house be an ADU? Yes, it can. So as we're allowing ADUs in more communities and having narrowing the way in which municipalities can put restrictions, there's a lot that may be different by the end of this session. So again, I encourage you to contact your state rep and your senator and say, this is important. Are you paying attention? Because we want to have it easier to have these housing choices available across the state.
Great. I'm going to do one more question. I'm noticing we're really just about at time. And the question is, are there any options for indoor modular construction for small homes? So I'm not sure if they're asking if they are built in an indoor environment or if they're asking for renovation options.
People still build in the rain? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, to be per what Chris is going to say, I think each of the panelists representing a business right now manufacture what they're presenting in an offsite, under roof, climate controlled environment. So yeah, to Chris's point, seems crazy not to, right?
It does, doesn't it? I would toot your horn too. I mean, BrightBuilt, I think, leading the way. I mean, I don't think many people thought of BrightBuilt as a modular builder. They're just a good builder. And it drives me, it's a little pet. It drives me nuts when we get stuff about being modular. Like there's a lot for sale in Brunswick that we're hopefully going to build on that has an HOA covenant that says you can't use modular construction. It's like,
Yeah,
do they even know what that is?
yeah.
I'm going
yeah,
to
we've
sneak
run
in
into
and
that.
build it tomorrow when they're not looking, and they won't know that it's modular.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
All right, well, we have come to the end of our session tonight. So again, I want to thank you all of our presenters for being here and sharing so much helpful information, and for all of the attendees who joined us. I hope that you learned some helpful new information. We will follow up with an email with all of those links, and our presenters have also agreed, if you have follow-up questions that we didn't answer tonight, we'll share that contact information in the email so that you can follow up with presenters. Thank you again to our sponsors, Royal River Heat Pumps and Senecal Construction Services. Thank you to Rain, who has been managing everything so beautifully behind the scenes. And mark your calendars for the next episode of the Home and Energy Chat series. We're doing a March 1st on Permaculture 101. And you'll find all the details about that on our website, greenmainhomes.com. And lastly, you will see a brief survey pop up when we close the webinar. We'd love to hear your feedback on today's session to help us craft future programming needs. So thank you once again to our presenters, and I hope everybody has a great evening.